Mahatma Gandhi and Bruce Springsteen. I was noticing the picture of Mahatma Gandhi there. I spent 2 years in a Hindu ashram way back in the 70s, and all of our teachers were called Mahatma because Mahatma means holy teacher. And the atmosphere in the ashram always felt very soft. The energy felt very soft, and the energy here feels very soft. So thank you for that gift. I was meditating this morning in the meditation room, and it just felt very much the same. So I want to remind you that I like to give out notes for my talks, and so a collapsed version of what I'm saying is in the notes in your bulletin. And you don't have to follow along unless you want to, but the pertinent points are there. I'd like to start with a verse from Psalm 118. This is the day which the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And my father was a minister, and he just loved that verse, and he used it again and again and again. And now I'm going to use the Science of Mind version. I'm going to say, this is the day which the law hath made, because Lord and law are the same thing in metaphysics, because the Lord of your life is the law which manifests your thought into physical manifestation. So this refers to the great law of cause and effect. Another way of looking at that is God loves us so much that he makes all of our dreams come true, including our bad dreams. In other words, all of your prayers are always answered, but it's up to you to make sure that your dreams are good dreams, so that when your prayer is answered, it will benefit all whom it touches in a sacred way. Ernest Holmes wrote a wonderful book called Love and Law. Actually, it was a set of lectures that was transcribed into a book, and they published it a few years back. And the first part of that book tells us that love takes form through the law to become the physical events of our lives. And in that book, he talks about the model and metaphysics of spirit taking form that you learn when you go through a class like Foundations. And then later in that book, he talks about the details of affirmative prayer, which we call spiritual mind treatment. It's a way of thinking on our part that allows our goals to become sacred and to manifest in a sacred way. So Science of Mind says spirit takes form. We have unformed spirit, which is love, takes form through the law, and it becomes the physical manifestation. Now I'm going to get to the chemicalization part. When we take a goal and we go about the process of making it manifest in our lives, what's the first thing that pops up? All the doubts, all the fears, all the reasons why we shouldn't do it. I've been a hypnotherapist for about 30 years, and I've worked with tons of people achieving their goals, and the reason they come to me is because they've run into a speed bump, and it's usually fear of some sort, and it may be great fear, it may be high anxiety, may even be panic attacks. So now I'm going to talk about Jesus casting the money changers out of the temple. And this has everything to do with what we're talking about. At the physical level, back then in those times, your money was no good in the temple. You had to get temple money. And so when you went to the temple, you took your money and you went to the money changers and they gave you temple money, and then you used the temple money to buy your animal for the sacrifice. And the money changers decided to make some money, and the whole thing became a bit of a racket. And so Jesus went in one day, about a week before they killed him, and this may have been part of why they killed him. He turned over the tables, and he said, "You are a den of thieves. You have turned the holy temple into a den of thieves." And looked at metaphysically, our doubts, our fears, our concerns, they're the den of thieves. And they come into the holy place, which is our consciousness, and they make it an unsacred place. And so what we need to do is to cast out of our minds these negative things, because we don't want to desecrate the temple of the living spirit, which is who we are. Now, we talk a lot about the presence of God, but it's not the presence of God that heals, it's the awareness of the presence of God. I'm the director of a Science of Mind group up in Reading, and we used to meet at a Church of the Brethren in Wyomissing, which is a suburb of Reading. And there was a period of time during which I was attending services at the Brethren Church, And the wonderful minister there, whom we all knew of as Pastor Tim, had a phrase he used to end his services with. He would say, "There is no place where God is not." And I always loved to hear that, not only because it was so true, but because it was so comforting. And it is wonderful to know that there is no place where God is not. And if you think of omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, the omnipresent part means God is everywhere. But that doesn't do us any good unless we're aware of it. If God is omnipresent, then God is present when someone is being beheaded by a member of ISIS. If God is omnipresent, then whenever any member of any world government anywhere does something that is not in the best interests of its citizens, God is there. But it's not doing those people any good. In our own lives, if we set a goal and it's not a sacred goal, or we go about it in a way that isn't sacred, then that experience is unsacred. So now I want to talk about Bruce Springsteen. I was stayed down here in a hotel last night, so I didn't have to drive down this morning. And PBS was doing one of their fundraising things, and so they were showing a film made in 1988 about Roy Orbison doing his famous concert, and they had like 5 guitarists in there, and one of them was Bruce Springsteen. And so they did, the whole concert, of course, was awesome. Everybody was in the vortex, as Abraham would say. And when they got to Pretty Woman and they did the break, they all the guitarists went after the other, played their own little riff, and Bruce Springsteen was in that holy place. He was just blissed out. And it was a young Bruce Springsteen. It was like 30 years ago when they made that film. And he was just in that perfect place. And so what I wanted to say was the thing that inspired him to become a professional musician was a holy desire, because he was destined to be that person who has blessed all of us with his music for so many years, and also his integrity as a person. So what we need to look at is, when we set a goal, is it a sacred goal or is it not a sacred goal? Even though God is present, because there's nowhere where God is not, we may not be aware of the presence of God. We may not be aware of Spirit. In that case, Spirit is not moving through, in, and as us in a holy way, as the works of our hand and feet. In those moments, we are desecrating the presence of God. So it's the awareness of the presence of God that heals. In other words, an awareness of the sacredness of life, that the presence of God is in every moment if we would just pay attention. What am I saying? It's not enough that we have desires, for everyone has desires, including the crack addict committing a crime to get their next fix. And sometimes I work with addicts, and I know how powerful and intense that desire is. Not everyone is living a sacred life, as we all well know from watching the news. Our desires must be purified by allowing the daily spiritual practice of meditation on life, and that's life with a capital L, to bring us to an awareness of the highest good of ourselves and others, that our goals made manifest may result in the highest good of all concerned, because that's a holy desire. In Jesus' first miracle, he turned water into wine at the marriage of Cana. Looking at this metaphysically, you'll find metaphysicians talking of the mystical marriage. That's the marriage between thought and feeling, which gives rise to the child, which is the physical manifestation in the world as our idea takes form. And that's a general idea. Anytime your thought and your feeling get together, you get married, something happens in the physical world as a result. At the very least, you have a reaction in your body because of the thought that you just had. So there's always a reaction in your body, and then oftentimes it will manifest in the world as an experience, as an event. So in a marriage, what we want to do is we want to marry our beloved. So in this case, our beloved is the idea of our goal. And all these people come to me for therapy, and they want to marry their beloved, and they're having trouble doing that. They're having a speed bump. And what they don't realize is that we have to marry the Christ consciousness. Because we purify this goal, we let it become a holy desire, so that now our desire within us is God within us as our holy desire. And in order to do this, we have to move into that consciousness that was in Christ Jesus. And so the offspring of the marriage of this goal with the Christ consciousness, which is now God in us as our holy desire, metaphysically becomes the Christ child, manifesting in the physical world as a divine outcome, the goal achieved. This turns our goal achievement into a sacred journey of meditation where we consecrate, that is, make holy, our desire by letting it be purified in the holy temple within. Goal achievement then becomes the process of allowing the goal to unfold within on a daily basis as inspired ideas which bring us back into an awareness of the sacredness of life. As we allow the highest good of all concerned to be our focus, then the achievement of the goal becomes a labor of love, and all of the acts involved in the achievement of that labor of love benefit all whom they touch. And we don't have to call it the awareness of the presence of God. Bruce Springsteen wasn't sitting there twanging his guitar and saying, I'm practicing the awareness of the presence of God. He was just playing and letting spirit move through him and come out as beautiful music in that context. And he did an absolutely delightful job, as did everybody else on the platform. I was just taken with him because I had forgotten that he had played in that production. And I looked at him and I said, that looks like Bruce. It is Bruce. And I remembered once again that it was him. And so I was paying particular attention to him, but everybody there was just in that perfect place where they were just in the groove. So what happens when we have a holy goal? What happens is it takes the fear, selfishness, and greed of the ego that we so often see outpictured in world affairs out of the picture. For example, the endless war in Syria, which has resulted in so much destruction of human life and physical locations and priceless historical artifacts, not to mention the utter misery and suffering of the flood of refugees fleeing the conflict and trying to find sanctuary in neighboring countries who are ill-equipped to deal with this. In other words, all of this came from a desire of people in power to extend their power. So yes, it was a desire, but a very unholy one. And we find it at the root of every war is an unholy desire. And there are many unholy wars, not just physical shooting wars, but trade wars, conflicts between government bodies, endless legal struggles, not to mention the terrible conflicts in relationships that result in abuse. And all of these come from very unholy desires. So it's not only important that we have a desire, but that it be a holy desire. That means it must be purified. It must become consecrated. And the process of chemicalization is the purification process, because you sit in meditation and everything unlike the love of God comes into your awareness. Everything in you that is imperfect about this goal comes into your mind, and you get to purify it. You get to let it go. You let the spirit move through it. You let your mind become perfectly still, and then the goal becomes holy. Now, the process of making a wish come true, I'm going to talk about Neville. He was very, very focused on getting things to happen in the physical world. And he said we have to change our state of mind. We have to dwell on the feeling of the wish fulfilled until it crowds all other ideas out of consciousness. So that person who comes to me and says, I'm having trouble achieving the goal, they haven't crowded all other ideas out of consciousness. They still have fears. They have anxieties. They have doubts. Somebody in their family was a wet blanket and said, you can't do that. You're too old for that. You can't go back to school, whatever the thing is. And so they have that idea rattling around in their head. And so you have to replace all of that with the goal. And the goal is to get back to the awareness of the presence. And the instant you do that, a feeling of peace envelops you. You are set free from any sense of urgency, and you're set free from that awful feeling of not having what you want. And at that moment, the statement of Jesus that when you believe that you have it, then you shall have it, comes to pass. Now, externally, there may be a sense of quietness, maybe even an appearance of non-action. But inwardly, you have a knowing that the work is done. And soon after this period of gestation, the goal unfolds perfectly in the external world as experience and event. Now, this is totally different from the human process of achieving a goal, where we get the goal and we try to pound it into the place, wrestle it to the ground, kill it, accomplish it with overwhelming force, go out there and do mass things like we apply for 30 jobs because we think we just have to keep applying, and it's frantic action. It's flailing at life. This is not a holy desire being carried out in a holy way. Maybe the desire for employment is a holy desire, but you're not listening to the presence within. So the daily purification of the prayer process ensures that this goal is a sacred goal and that it unfolds perfectly. That's because the ego, which is full of fear, doubt, anger, and other negative emotions, has everything backwards and upside down. You ever notice when you get upset, you forget everything you know and you become stupid? Because the ego is just everything upside down. And so when you act, when you are upset, you will always make the problem worse. Ideas that come when you are flailing at life do not solve anything, do not make life better. And people who do this badly enough, often enough, wind up on the front page of the Metro section because they committed some terrible crime. So in other words, it is very possible to seek the wrong goals. If we listen to the voice that is traditionally called the tempter, that is worldly thinking, we will be pursuing the wrong goals for the wrong reasons in the wrong way. I want to read from Luke chapter 4. And the devil, taking Jesus up into a high mountain, shewed unto him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said unto him, All this power will I give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will, I give it. If thou therefore wilt worship me, all shall be thine. So that's the voice of the tempter saying, pursue worldly things, and you'll be happy. And what did Jesus say? He answered and said unto him, Get thee behind me, Satan. For it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. And so we know that the Lord is the law, and it's the law of love moving into perfect manifestation. So Jesus was saying, take love and move it into action through the law, and this only shall you serve. As an example, desire to enjoy life is a holy desire. In fact, the root of all of our desires are holy desires. But the idea to satisfy this desire through addiction to drugs or other addictive behavior, and that's the unholy part, and that's what we have to purify. So now I'm going to read from Galatians chapter 5. But I say, walk by the Spirit, do not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. And so once again, we come back to the idea that the goal must be a holy desire. Now, once you have purified your desire through meditation and prayer, how are you to achieve it? Do we have to figure it all out through our conscious minds? That's what we're taught from birth, that you have to figure it all out. And the answer is no. It's not our job to figure out how. That is up to the divine providence to determine, which always comes up with a much better way than our limited egoic thinking could possibly imagine. Bob Dooley is a frequent speaker in Unity. He speaks of this as the cursed hows. When we get caught up in the tangle of trying to figure out how to achieve the goal, we are departing from the divine plan. Because in the divine plan, it's already done. You don't have to figure out how. You're trying to outthink God when you try to figure out how. But when you let the divine providence determine the how with a capital H, it comes to you easily, it comes to you effortlessly, and it always brings you more good than you could possibly have imagined. It also comes much more quickly. Because when the ego says, oh, I need to achieve a goal, yeah, and I have to do this, and I have to go back to school, but I can't go back to school because I don't have money, so I have to get a job, and there's no good job, so I'm going to have to take 2 bad jobs, and I won't have any time left, so, my life sucks, and so it's time to go live under a bridge because I can't achieve my goal. There's no way whatsoever to get there. That's what the ego says. God says, take a breath, relax, and listen, and you'll have a result by tomorrow. That's what God says, because there's no delay in the mind of God. Doing it this way, goal achievement is effortless, yet also compelling, because we find ourselves compelled into action that brings peace and joy, both to us and to all concerned. It is fully involving as we are swept up in this joyful action, And it is full of the awareness of the presence of Spirit. So it's blissful. When we become aware of the presence of Spirit within us, then we experience that peace that passeth understanding. And we know what to do. It's obvious. And even if what we now know to do is difficult, we will be given the strength to carry it through. Again, Gandhi was given some things to do that were not easy, but he was also given the strength to carry them through. This is the anointing of the Spirit, and this is the outcome of the daily meditative process. I want to give a personal example. Many years ago, I got the impulse to get a doctoral degree in clinical hypnotherapy. It was a holy desire, and it required daily rededication for 11 years of late night studying and writing. I often did it from 12 to 2 in the morning because that was the only time I had. That was a holy desire because it has benefited and continues to benefit many people. But many times I was tempted to cut corners just to get something done faster. Sometimes I said to myself, why did I sign up for this? It's such a huge thing to complete. That's the voice of the tempter. But I'm glad I didn't yield to these temptations to give up, as the outcome of being meticulous, methodical, and comprehensive has been magnificent, more than I could have imagined. I ended up designing a program, and I've put about 100 medical and mental health and similar people through that program. It goes all the way to the graduate school level. I couldn't have done it if I hadn't done it all myself. And I was uniquely qualified to do that. It's the only program of its kind in the country at this time, and I have won awards for it. Now, I'm not saying this to toot my horn. I'm saying this to give you a sense of what a holy desire is like. For a holy desire is a big thing, and it causes you to become more than you were when you began. You become a bigger person. And what does that mean? You become capable of giving more. For this is all about giving. A holy desire will cause you to give more than you have ever given, but it will be a joyful giving. And what happens when we give in pursuit of a holy desire? Well, God wants us to be happy, healthy, and prosperous, for our barns to be full to bursting. From Proverbs, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. From Luke, give, and it will be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. From Deuteronomy, the Lord will open to you his good treasury, the heavens, to give the rain to your land in its season, and to bless all the work of your hands. From Ephesians, now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all that we ask or think, according to the power at work within us. And from Psalms, you crown the year with your bounty, your wagon tracks overflow with abundance, the pastures of the wilderness overflow, the hills gird themselves with joy, as Catherine Ponder likes to say. God's gift to us is peace, health, and plenty. Now, for the next several weeks, you're going to be talking about crossing the bridge. And the mystic Neville declared that when our desire is received by God, it manifests over a bridge of incident. And he meant a bridge of incidents, this thing, this thing, this thing. Meaning things happen day by day, unfolding in a very natural way. Sometimes things will happen that seem miraculous but natural, and other times it will just be a stream of ideas that will help your goal unfold step by step. But you will get to your goal, and it will be satisfying, and it will be fulfilling. In fact, the achievement of a holy desire is absolutely guaranteed, for it will be full of the awareness of the presence of God. For as my beloved friend Pastor Tim likes to say, there is no place where God is not. Thank you.
I love that. There is no place that God is not.